It's 5:30. I'd like to call our city council meeting to order. I have a motion to begin with this evening, and that is to allow Councilmember Whitelock to participate electronically by means of start leave, and that the council finds it to be in the public interest that she be allowed to do so.
That's your motion?
I'm sorry?
Just to clarify, you're making that motion?
Yes, I am.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And just a warning, when she does connect, there will be a very loud phone ringing in our chambers here. So don't be alarmed at that. The first item of order of business tonight, it sounds like she's coming along. Okay. Welcome, Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you.
We will begin with the redevelopment agency meeting. And the first item is to, an item of business, approve the minutes of August 14th, 2019, as presented. You have a motion and a second?
So moved.
So seconded.
I have a motion by Councilmember Burton, second by Councilmember Anderson. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item 2B, discussion of possible action regarding resolution 19-219, approving the 2020 annual meeting schedule for the City of West Jordan Redevelopment Agency. Jamie.
The suggested meeting schedule for both the RDA, MBA, and FES for the year of 2020 is as it's been in the past, which is to be basically on an as-needed basis. No specific dates ahead of time.
Thank you. I'll open that up for discussion by the board members or a motion.
I move to adopt.
And Councilmember Anderson?
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Anderson. Any discussion to the motion? Let's vote.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
Chair Writing?
Yes.
Board Member Burton?
Aye.
Board Member McConaughey?
Aye.
Board Member Whitelock?
Yes.
And Board Member Jacob?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Do we have a motion to adjourn the redevelopment agency meeting and open the municipal building authority meeting?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Jacob, a second by Councilmember Burton. Discussion to the motion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Item 2, business items. Approve the minutes of June 26, 2019 as presented. Jamie. Any discussion to those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
We have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item 2B, approve resolution 19-102, approving the 2020 annual meeting schedule for the City of West Jordan Municipal Building Authority. Jamie.
Again, just as needed by the board over the course of 2020.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Move to approve.
Councilmember Anderson.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey, second by Councilmember Anderson. The discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Board Member Burton?
Aye.
Board Member Whitelock?
Yes.
Board Member McConaughey?
Aye.
Chair Writing?
Yes.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Jacob?
I think that was me. Yes.
And then Board Member Lamb.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Move to adjourn this meeting and convene the Fairway Estates meeting.
Second.
Councilmember Anderson. We have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey, a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item 2A, approve the minutes of June 26, 2019, presented by Jamie.
Move to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
We need to, no, we don't, just kidding.
Okay. Thank you.
That was the resolution, that's the next one.
Item 2B, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 19-209, approving the 2020 annual meeting schedule for the City of West Jordan Fairway Estates Special Service Recreation District. Jamie.
I recommend you move to have your board meet on an as-needed basis during 2020.
Councilmember Lamb
I move to approve Resolution 19-209.
and Councilmember Anderson.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Board Member Whitelock,
Yes.
Board Member McConaughey,
Aye.
Board Member Lamb,
Yes.
Chair Riding,
Yes.
Board Member Jacob,
Yes.
Board Member Burton,
Aye.
and Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
And we have a motion to adjourn the Fairway Estates. Councilmember McConaughey, Board Member McConaughey.
Move to adjourn Fairway Estates meeting and convene city council.
And Board Member Anderson.
Yes, it's going to be a second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We will now move to do the city council meeting, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll invite Scott if he would come and lead us. The first item on the agenda tonight is the citizen comments. We'll open that citizen comments and remind folks that they have 3 minutes to address city council regarding any issue on the agenda for tonight or any other issue they wish to address council regarding. And I will start with those that have signed up, and we have one signed up, Cameron Valdez. Cameron?
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Carmen Valdez.
My apologies.
No, you're fine. I get it all the time. Are you ready? That's the worst beep ever. Excellent. I'm here before you guys to discuss HB 411, the 100% net clean energy resolution that has passed the Utah State Legislature this past legislative session. And in the process, 13 cities have now signed on for that resolution. So I was born and raised in West Jordan, same with my mother, same with my grandmother. My great-grandparents helped establish West Jordan and a lot of communities here. And most of my family still lives here as well, including my great aunts and uncles and their kids and everything. I believe West Jordan is a beautiful city. I see we're a leader in communities and community development, but I am a little upset that I haven't seen West Jordan moving forward with renewable energy, clean energy, and things like that. HB 411 was passed in hopes of gathering all of the Utah communities together to work with Rocky Mountain Power to develop a plan so that by 2030, all these communities are 100% net clean renewable energy. The cities that have passed include Park City, Salt Lake City, Moab, Oakley, Kearns, Camas, Mill Creek, Francis, Ogden City just passed a resolution as well. And West Valley City Council is drafting a resolution today to have on the agenda for next week. So I'm here to ask for you guys and urge you to commit to 100% clean energy by 2030 by passing a city resolution which will commit you to this HB 411. And this has to be done prior to December 31st, 2019. That's why I'm here and bringing it up when it's not on the agenda. I understand that that's a very quick turnaround. However, this resolution does not commit you for those 10 years or 50 years or however long this commitment is. It basically just provides an opportunity for West Jordan to be at the table for those discussions with all of these cities and Rocky Mountain Power to find solutions for renewable energy here in our city and within our state. I understand that this may not be a huge issue right now, but as we look outside with how great our inversion's been today, looking for renewable sources that can help bring that down is something we should look forward to if we want to continue building as a state and bringing more people into our state. So I urge council members and the mayor to consider passing a resolution in support of HB 411. Again, there is an opportunity if there's a reason you guys feel this isn't a program you'd like to commit with, you can pull out after December 31st. And there's also possibilities for citizens to self-choose to elect out of this program. But this does give your citizens an opportunity to get renewable energy when they may not have had that opportunity in the past.
Thank you. I have no more that has signed up, so anyone that would like to address council, please come to the microphone and state your name, and reminder that you have 3 minutes.
Ridge. I know Mr. Writing has a distinguished career in construction, but somehow the Public Works building and the block, the masonry block chosen for said building, a new experimental block was chosen. And the problems that came with that block that was required of the mason to use to build that building have been laid solely at the feet of the mason. I don't believe for a second that a person with 40 years construction experience didn't know this was an experiment. This was the first time this block has been made in Utah. So I came to face you, Mr. Writing, and you, Mr. Bricky, who I also approached, only to be told to go back to the person, Patrick Alcorn, that had already denied even the opportunity to speak with. So I'm here tonight just to say hi. I have an additional list of questions that I'll give to the council, but we're not going away. And whether, according to the city attorney, the new administration or the old administration, which one is more likely to settle this conflict, I don't know. I see much of the same. So I have no real hope that anything will actually ever get done, but I'm not going away. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council this evening?
Steve Jones, 3234 West, 6920 South here in West Jordan. Just a couple thoughts on my mind. After last night's county council and their vote to increase our taxes, I gotta admit, one of the things I'm getting real tired of is making it sound like I can't do simple math and I can't understand what our tax base is. I constantly see our elected officials telling us that we need to raise our taxes to cover cost of living and some other things, but yet somehow the price of my home seems to be going up and I seem to be paying more taxes on it. I also hear about economic development and all the economic development that we're bringing to the city, but yet here's an entity that's standing in line with their handout. I'm asking the council tonight to, let's get back to basics. As far as I'm concerned, the city's job is to provide very specific services. And one of those services is our first responders. That's a crucial part of our town. Last night on the other side of Bangerter Highway, not very far from where I live, we have a drive-by shooting. But yet, we're more concerned about having what I think in my mind is frills and bells and whistles that really just take care of a few residents of the city rather than the city as a whole. I'm tired of seeing a good portion of my paycheck go somewhere else and not getting anything returned for it. I don't think it's right. And I think it's up to you as elected officials and those that are coming in to make some of these corrections. When I start to wonder about whether I go out of my house and whether I'm going to be safe or not, to me that's starting to go down the wrong path. And I believe that's where we're heading. Thanks.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, there are some public hearing items too, so if you're here to address one of those, you can do it at that time. So is anyone else wishing to address council? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And I've been asked to have a presentation by Keddington moved up and not included as, there is a business item that we will be talking about, but also there's a presentation by Keddington. So is there any objection by council members to moving that presentation up to now? Councilmember Conahay.
I'm just curious how long it's expected to take, because we do have a number of folks in the audience who are here for public hearings, so.
I was told 5 minutes. So
If we run the
That's
timer
what I
and
was
it comes
told.
out under 5 minutes, I'd be okay with that.
Something tells me you'll have a timer going.
seeing no other objections, then let's turn the time over to Keddington for that presentation.
My name's Marcus Arbuckle with Keddington and Christensen. We finalized the audit for fiscal year 19. There's a few things we need to go over with governance. We consider the council to be governance. And part of your responsibility is to oversee the financial reporting process of the city, where management is responsible for the actual financial statements. And an audit does not relieve governance or management of those responsibilities. As auditors, we plan and perform an audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. And then we issue an opinion on the financial statements. We've issued a clean opinion. That opinion is on the basic financial section, which includes the footnotes. We provide limited assurance on the supplemental schedules and the MD&A, and then the statistical and the introduction portion are unaudited. Another important part of the audit is the report on internal controls. We do not issue an opinion on the internal controls, but we review those controls to see if there's any areas that those controls can be improved. The controls that we looked at relate to the cash receipting process, the cash disbursement process, the payroll process, and then the financial close and reporting process. We did not have any recommendations to improve those processes. We feel that the controls in place are adequate. The third report that we issue as part of this audit is related to federal awards. If a city expends more than $750,000 of federal funds, a single audit is required. This year, the major program tested was a community development block grant. We didn't have any issues with the testing related to that grant. The last report that we issue with this audit is the report on state compliance. We test several areas of state compliance, including budgetary compliance, fund balance, justice court compliance, URS compliance, restricted cash and taxes, Open and Public Meetings Act, the Public Treasurer's Bond, and the impact fee requirements. We do have a couple findings related to those state compliance items, and they're listed on page 11 of the supplemental report. I believe you have a copy of that. Real quick, the first finding is related to the Open and Public Meetings Act. One of the requirements with that is that once meeting minutes are approved, They're supposed to be uploaded to the Utah State Public Notice website within 3 business days. We just tested a couple that they didn't make it within that time frame. The second finding was related to fund balance. There's one fund, it's called the Highland Special Revenue Fund, that's in a deficit fund balance at the end of the year. It's not a large deficit, it's about $8,200. But just keep that in mind that the fund balance in each of the funds should be at a positive balance. And the third area was in the Class C road fund. There were expenditures over budget in that fund. And it had to do with a project that was approved after the final budget amendment, which caused the expenditures to be a little higher than expected. But I've gone through it pretty quick, but any questions related to any of those findings or to any of the reports or opinions that go with this audit?
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. Just a quick question. So the findings aren't anything that are critical. It's just a couple minutes weren't uploaded on time. We have a negative balance in one of our funds of about you said $8,600?
Yeah, $8,200, yeah.
And then the
Class C road fund.
Class C road funds was just timing. There was additional expense that happened after we revised the budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So
That's all I had. Thank you.
okay, yeah, and as far as we didn't have any difficulties performing the audit. There's no uncorrected misstatements. We didn't have any disagreements with management. We take fraud procedures very seriously. We email members of council, management, employees to see if anyone's aware of anything like that. We review journal entries. We have meetings as auditors to discuss areas of fraud, and I'm happy to report we didn't find any instances of fraud. But thank you for your time, and thank Denise. She does a great job putting everything together. It's nice when people are very prepared, which she is, so we'd like to thank her for that. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember McConaughey.
With 4 seconds to spare before the 5-minute mark. I would like to move to adopt Resolution 19-207, and with that, offer a thank you to our auditor and a huge thank you to Ms. Steck for a very boring audit this year. So very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, that was kind of jumping ahead to allowing that as a business item to be able to discuss by council.
If it's a motion, I'll second it, but if you'd like to not allow the motion till later, we can not allow it till later.
No, I would be okay with that as well. So we have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey, a second by Councilmember Jacob. Discussion to that motion then. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
yes,
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Burton?
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
And Mayor Riding.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Councilmember McConaughey. Move things up a little. Public hearing. We'll open the public hearing for A, receive public input and consider for approval ordinance 19-45, amending the general plan land use map amendment for 10.02 acres from very low density residential to low density residential and rezone from RR-1D rural residential 1 acre minimum lots zone to R-1-12F single family residential 12,000 square foot minimum lots zone and RE-20F residential estate 20,000 square foot minimum lots zone 7401 South, 5490 West, Barber Property, Peterson Development LLC, Ryan Peterson applicant, Larry Gardner.
Good evening. Since the council's seen this already, I'll be brief. This is located off of 5490 South West, which is a road currently a private road, or mostly private road, between 70 and 7800 South. To orient to a little bit, what is surrounding it to the direct south is two subdivisions that are R112. To the east are 1 acre lots, and then half-acre lots up in this, to the kind of the northeast, which are properties that are real residential and have animal rights associated with them. To the north is larger, it's a 5 acre piece of property that is used to keep large animals and that type of, whatever type of large animals that they want. Then across the street is an active dairy farm, both cows and goats in the future that will be milked. While it's not an agricultural production area, it's surrounded by properties that do have large animal rights and hobbies of that type of thing. It's not truly in an agricultural area where you have water runoff and herbicide spray, insecticides and that type of thing floating around in the air in large quantities. This map shows the division of what the applicant is proposing after the Planning Commission meeting in August. But basically 2/3 of it will be, they're asking to be rezoned to R112 with a smaller portion next to the eastern large lot properties that have animal rights to be rezoned to RE20. And the issue came up at the last council meeting about 5490 coming off 7800 South and response time from the fire department, this property being outside the 4-minute response, minimum response time of the fire department that follows the ordinance, I should say, that has been adopted by the city. And so if this subdivision is to go forward, at the time of subdivision, this road would have to be dedicated and constructed. Because right now the fire department has to snake its way, and the batteries are dying on this, sneaking its way through the neighborhood, which slows the response time down dramatically. Where if they can come straight down 5490, it would be a much quicker response time. So do you have any questions of me?
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. The question I have is, does the road need to be a public road for the fire department to be able to use it? In other words, there are houses on 5490 West currently. Are they outside the scope of the fire department to be able to get there?
No, the issue is that in order to get to this development, the fire department, we'd have to go through the neighborhoods and snake up, which increases our response time, where if it was connected to 5490, then we can go in. The only other thing is that we need to have, it needs to be an improved surface that can support the weight of an engine and all kinds of weather and stuff. So,
Okay,
you know, if it's just a dirt road.
Is the current surface inadequate as far as we know?
I think the surface is okay on 5490, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but it's just the length issue,
Okay,
the distance.
So if it were hypothetically to remain, that's the word I'm looking for, to remain a private road, that in its current condition, but it was stubbed into the development, maybe only for fire department emergency access, would that satisfy the requirement that the fire department has? Maybe not ideal, but we're doing Oker West on the west side of the city that has, for its first phase or two, it has an emergency little secondary access for fire department. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I would defer to our fire marshal on that. I think the key would be that it would just have to meet the fire code requirements for an apparatus, considering the weight, considering turnaround distances, things like that, the width of the street, and then also an improved surface.
Hi, Paul.
That's correct, and I think that's a great question. 5490 is critical for us to be able to stay within the 4-minute response time. And we hadn't discussed it, it hadn't been brought up, but we could look at doing a limited access, a gate of some sort across the access from 5490, much as we've done for Mocher West onto Bacchus Highway. Part of the issue, as we have reviewed this over the years, is the fact that as a private lane, that means it's limited access because it's only going to be people going down there. Normally, we try to drive on public roads and public accessible roads. So that's why this has become an issue, that 5490 be improved to be an actual full-size public right-of-way, public road. And that's why we kind of pressed this issue on this.
Got it. Okay, appreciate that, thank you.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. My question is, 5490 appears that on our master plan that it's going to be a public road, but it's currently an HOA road. I'm just not sure how we go from we want it to remain private road, just taking it as public road. Is there a procedure that we're following? Just waiting for developers to come in and want to develop? And my other question on the project is, I know since I've been on the council, another development $100 was approved. Can you tell me on this map where that was?
I couldn't understand it either.
We're having a hard time understanding you, Councilmember. Councilmember McConaughey's has an idea?
Yeah. Sorry if I could still afford for a sec. I know when I've had to connect remote, sometimes with the laptop speakers, it causes an issue. I'm wondering if it might be possible to use the cell phone for the audio connection rather than the computer. I think we might be able to hear better that way. Staring at our IT guy.
Was that, did you hear Councilmember Jacobs, Kayleen, did you hear his comment? Do it again, Councilmember.
Thanks, Dirk. My lip reading and from what I could hear, did you ask if, and you can just nod or not, if there's a process that we follow to make a private road into a public road and what the steps are in that process? That's kind of what I picked up on the gist of your question. Is that about right? Okay, she's nodding, so.
So that process would, first we would plan if a road was intended to be in the location where it's at. And 5490 is indeed on our transportation master plan as a collector road. It has been for years now. And so it was always the intent of the city someday to make that a dedicated public road. And as the council is probably aware, a great number of the roads in the municipality are built by developers as they're subdividing property and constructing subdivisions. In fact, the vast majority of the roads in the city have been constructed that way. And so that is how we generally deal with it. If it's on by subdivision, our ordinances require boundary roads with all subdivision. This happens to be a boundary collector road. And so it would be required to be dedicated to the city and constructed as a public road. And that is how we would arrive at going from a private property issue to a public dedication.
If I could
go ahead,
add to what Mr. Gardner said, essentially, if this development were to go forward and move forward, regardless of the zoning, they would follow the same process that you see that happened just to the south on Bella Estates and Winter Circle. You can see on this slide, it has orange. That orange sliver has been dedicated as public right-of-way as part of their subdivision process. So that portion has already been converted to public right-of-way, following the steps that Mr. Gardner already indicated. The blue that you see on here has already been dedicated as public right-of-way. We have the full width on the southern leg of 5490, and so we would just follow that same process and wait for development to take care of the dedication, unless the city felt like it needed to move forward in a more rapid pace and not wait for development, then we would have the ability to go and purchase additional right-of-way and follow that process. So I don't know if that answers your question, Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you. My other question, I think we answered it, that it was where the other ones that the Boulder want to develop, and those are where the orange is, correct?
When Bella Estates and Winter Circle Estates were constructed, as Scott said, the property was dedicated, so it's now in public, it's in, the city's in control of it, but the cost of the improvements and design costs were deferred, and a substantial amount of money was deposited with the city. So when construction does take place on 5490, the city already has money to cover the costs that he would have incurred in constructing the road at the time this development was approved. So.
Thank you.
Chief Maxfield, do you still have a question or a comment? Okay, your microphone's still on. Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, when I looked at the notes, the Planning Commission had some concerns on there. Have those concerns been resolved? Or are they still in existence?
The concern was the compatibility between, mainly to the east. And sorry for the pause, but I was trying to think back on what the concerns were. But the primary concern was smaller lots next to larger lots. Okay, and the concern was that you would be putting an R112 subdivision next to people who have large animals, and they were concerned that when the people moved in here that they would start to complain about the large animals, because large animals have odors and flies and tend to make noises at weird times and that type of thing, and they produce a lot of manure and stuff like that. And so, and the other concern was the Planning Commission kind of felt that the larger lots were consistent with the rural feel that has been established along 5490. Those were the main concerns. The applicant did, at one time this whole thing was R112 lots, but the applicant, to their credit, did go back and, as I said, put, well, you can see it better here, put half-acre lots adjacent to the properties that will have large animals. However, they did make it rural estate, not rural residential, but they're still larger lots, and they're probably more compatible in area or lot size than the R112. I've never believed that a single family home is not compatible with another single family home, but these lots are closer to the lot size of the people to the east. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but.
So that was pretty good. Mm-hmm. So because it has the E in there, they cannot have the large animals, is that correct?
No.
Thank you.
And this developer, the reason they do real estate is because they never have developed rural residential lots, so they're comfortable with what they build, so.
Okay. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll try and be careful with my question because the opinion side and more of that needs to wait until after the public hearing. But what I want to try and understand is, well, as Councilmember Burton mentioned, there's a negative recommendation from the Planning Commission, and there were 3 separate findings that caused them to give the unanimous negative recommendation. The staff recommendation, it says, staff offers a weak positive recommendation to the City Council. I don't remember seeing that weak qualifier on other recommendations, and I wanted to know, why is this a weak positive? Why not a solid yes or no? And
well, I think you're right. The staff who wrote this is broaching new territory, but I think a yes or no answer is much more appropriate. So I would say it's a recommendation to approve it.
still having the word week in here makes me wonder what items in there
I think it was,
raise the eyebrow to say this. I'm not comfortable saying absolutely yes, run with the city council.
Yeah.
What were those things that gave pause?
I think the reason that the staff who wrote this report did that is because he had concerns with the compatibility of the lot sizes and the fact that the planning commission was opposed to this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I just want to get a little clarification if we can back up a slide or two. So, okay, thank you. That one will work. Okay, so to the east, we have the RR1E zones. And originally, this was proposed to be the R112 like it is to the south and to the south. And the division was because the developer met with the residents, and so met with the neighborhood, and this was kind of a compromise. This is kind of a way to make it a more compatible use to the RR1E to the east with the RE20 on the east side of the parcel, and then the R112 to the west. Correct? Is that how I'm understanding?
I don't know if it was a result of them meeting with the neighbors. Maybe Scott, maybe you know more than about that.
Well, I would prefer to have the developer answer that question.
Okay.
We didn't have staff at that meeting, so we don't know.
Don't know, okay. So I'll wait for that part. And then the large animals are on the agricultural side, they're on the west side. And I do get that, I've had to deal with stuff like this in a prior life with the Chamber of Commerce, where housing next to industrial or housing next to farming, and I don't. So I guess, and I think I brought this up last time, is, you know, I just see incompatible uses where we have housing built next to rail yards. We have housing built next to mink farms. We have housing built next to agricultural. We have housing built near plants that produce things and have odors and things like that. And then we get calls and emails from residents that say, you know, my next door neighbor smells. But then, let me rephrase that. The next door neighbor's property has odors emanating. It's December. But on the other side of the token, this used to all be agricultural, and we've just always had homes coming, right? I mean, the homes to the east were farmlands. Where I live was farmland back in the 90s.
Of course it was. West Jordan was a farming community. I remember growing up here, and to me, everybody's a newcomer because I've lived here for 60 years. And so, but there are protections for agricultural operations as far as odors and noise and dust and that type of thing already adopted in our code. And so when housing is brought to that precipice where they're right next to the agricultural operation, it cannot be declared a nuisance unless it's grossly negligent. They're letting animals die or feces build up. And it's also in state law that, so they are protected. Their rights are protected to keep producing that, so.
Okay, and so, and tied in with this, I can kind of see where there's kind of this transition as we get closer to 5600 West, which is a major thoroughfare. So, I don't really have a question, it's more just, I guess, comments and thoughts as I look at the plan. So that's all I have, and I'll wait to see what else happens.
Scott, you had another comment?
Perhaps answer Council Member McConaughey's earlier question about why the different type of a recommendation than normal. There's pros and cons to this. As you look at this slide, I wish it was a little bit zoomed out, but this area's undergone a significant transformation over the past 5 or so years. 5600 West being the major change out there. This used to be way out there, very remote, and very rural. And once that major arterial road went in, it changed the whole feel and dynamics of that area. This is truly one of those policy calls that the council has to perhaps look at the general plan and see if that's appropriate, not just for this piece, but for the full 5490 area. You look at what was approved just to the south with the Bella Estates and Winter Circle. The question the council should ask, is it appropriate to continue that trend to the north? If so, where is that line going to stop in the future? If the vision of the council wants to change based on the change of all the growth out there, what is appropriate for that full build out of that neighborhood? We're seeing other neighborhoods on the east side of town that have been insulated from growth, and they've maintained their animal rights, and that's kind of a unique niche that they have. But we've seen other areas develop out into beautiful big neighborhoods. Over by Smith's, for example, the Okubo Farms. Those are big, beautiful homes. I think that's R112 as well. So it really, truly is a policy call. It's a legislative decision. That's why there's a list of pros and cons, and that's why Councilmember McConaughey, perhaps we should have been a little more clear on a recommendation, but there's a list of pros and cons for this decision. There's precedent on both directions.
See no further questions from council. I will open up the public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to address City Council, please come to the microphone. And a reminder that you'll have 3 minutes to address council on this issue.
My name is Tiffany Ostrander. I live at 5327 Jacob Hill Circle, so directly east of the development. And I did speak last time, so I know you guys are aware of the situation. Peterson Development has been the talk of our neighborhood for a few months now. And I did attend a meeting that they hosted for our neighborhood just about a week ago. I thought that we would come to a resolution, but then today, again, seeing non-animal lots proposed, I realized that we have not quite got there yet. This is kind of discouraging. I don't think any of my neighbors have changed their feelings on the situation since the first city council hearing. I will say it got me thinking to why my neighbors were so passionate about this area and where they live, and just not in my backyard stance. Luckily, the city website and the planning department have been very useful to me in the last couple of days. I did get provided with a zoning by subdivision name and also a very colorful map of how our city is zoned out. According to this, which was last updated in March, there's 398 subdivisions in this city. Do you know how many of them are 1 acre or plus subdivisions? 10. That's 2%. 2% neighborhoods in our city have 1 acre or plus subdivisions. So my neighbors have located to this neighborhood because there's nowhere else for them to go. It's a dying neighborhood. It's a dying culture that we need to maintain for this city. The open agriculture areas have characterized West Jordan for so long, and they're dwindling. We should all be concerned about this. We should preserve established residential neighborhoods and prevent encroachment on incompatible uses in the area. The proposed development is not compatible with the horse property or agriculture farms that are surrounding. So I just asked the city council to consider how valuable that remaining 2% is to the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Shealy, and I live at 5302 West Jacob Hill Circle. I'm a newcomer to West Jordan, I guess. But the reason I moved out there is because of the way it was developed. I like an open space. I live on an acre, and I appreciate being away from my neighbors a little bit. And what I see the incompatibility of this development is right in the middle of all of it, even though Bella Estates was rezoned to without animal rights property as such. They're starting to put that in the middle of everything that goes on 5490, is it? Is that correct? Just isn't compatible. I mean, that's why we built there. That's why we were excited to be able to move out to West Jordan, was because of the acre lots that were offered there. And to put that in the middle makes it contentious neighbors between us and them. And it's not that I'm against development. I realize you build it, they will come. But in that particular segment of our city, it was developed for horse rights and animal usage. And that's why we bought, and that's why we live there. And to change it just because someone wants to develop it or sell their property or whatever they want to do with their land is their right. But to develop it in such a way that it makes a contentious relationship between the neighbors does not make a lot of sense. So with that, I'm totally against it because of the rezoning of the animal rights zoning. To take that away is not fair to us as neighbors and to the future neighbors that would live there. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Marlise Bruff, and I live at 7276 South Tico. And I, too, am a newbie to West Jordan. I've only lived here about 4 years, sorry. And when we were investigating moving, we looked at over 100 houses between Spanish Fork and West Jordan. And the main reason that we chose where we live is because of the incredible neighborhood feel, the opportunity that I have, if I choose, to have large animals. And the first thing when people come and visit me, what they say is, how did you ever find a piece of property like this? You just can't find residential property like this anymore. And I feel that this particular rezoning sets a precedent, changing the integrity of the entire area with no buffer for those of us who already do live here. I'm not opposed to development, but it makes me sad to think that the council would want to lose this unique rural neighborhood in West Jordan.
Thank you.
Steve Jones, 3234 West, 6920 South. I really don't have a dog in this fight, but I agree with these people that have spoken. This area was, in essence, dedicated to the larger lots and animal rights. And just like everything we see, we let the developers come in and basically run roughshod. They tell us the only thing they can sell is high-density housing, and we start to see this encroachment. I really think that these people that have bought out there have bought for a reason. And the property still has value. Things can still be purchased. And the developers and stuff will get their money. But it's to a very specific group. And they have a place in our city. And this area is kind of somewhat isolated from the other parts that have been rezoned, and so there's a little bit of a buffer there. And now we see a developer coming in and wanting to chew that buffer down, and the next thing you know, we're gonna see, 10,000 acre lots, and then we're gonna see high density. That's their normal that I've seen over the last, 5 or 6 years that I've been coming to these meetings. Some point you gotta put your foot down and say, no. This is a animal rights area. That's what it needs to be developed at. Developer can go buy somebody else's piece of ground and build their lots over there. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Milton Scow. I live at 5332 Laurel Hill Circle. My property is directly east of this proposed development. I would like to mention one thing. I did not receive a letter in the mail regarding this meeting. I have meetings in the past, but this one I did not. So I don't know, maybe I could talk to somebody in the future about that. I, like the previous speakers, I'm not opposed to development. I know it's going to happen. I've already lost a good part of my view of the Okers already, and I expect to lose more when this property gets developed, as I know it will. I just don't believe that the plan in place right now is the proper plan for this. I think we're kind of getting the cart away in front of the horse when we say we're going to put in, 19 homes in here, and we're going to have that one small entrance and exit out of it, which brings me back to the meeting, the Planning Commission. Someone mentioned earlier about the Planning Commission forward some negative votes, and they did. They 2 negative ones, and I'll read from the minutes. It does not meet the general use plan, or whatever it is, GLUP, based on finding A is not consistent with the general plan. It is not consistent with the general plan, is not consistent with the neighborhood. It does not meet the health, safety, and welfare of the area, and it does not meet the public services, including fire protection, not being available in the 4-minute limit. I think what we need to do is maybe see what the city's plan is as far as 5490 to get that, because you have several people that own that property. I think you're gonna have to negotiate with each and every one of them unless you claim eminent domain on the rest of it and take it over. So why don't we get that ironed out first and then maybe look at what we're gonna do on that development. I ideally would like to see half-acre lots throughout that whole area. Just zone it one thing, make it half-acre, and let the people have animals. That way, most of the people around them would be happy with it. I think the people that bought it, the half-acres would be. Half-acre lots are in short supply. When we moved to West Jordan just about 10 years ago, it was the only place we could find anything half an acre or over that was suitable for us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi there, Ryan Peterson. I'm the applicant on this, so I thought I should get up, answer a few questions and make a few comments, dispel a few items as well. As has been stated, we did hold an open house last week. We had a good turnout. It was about 2 hours long. We held a good discussion with a number of people. We thought it was fruitful and good communication back and forth, so we could put forth what our plan has been all along here, which is to create and provide new lots, new options, new housing. We know we need this in this valley. It's a very popular place to live. We certainly have a lot of kids and they need places to live. I think it goes without saying, everyone who lives in a house, it was built and it was put in that place. A lot was created because of development, and it's kind of a fact of life. Having said that, I do recognize there's a time and place for a certain size lot and the type of lot and type of development. As has been pointed out, we started out requesting R112 for the whole 10 acres. We have amended that since that time, so 2/3 of it is that zone, but a full 1/3 of it along the eastern border is half-acre lot minimums. And while we have been not used to selling, in the habit of selling lots with animal rights, we've never done that, so it put us a little bit out of our comfort zone to begin with. We are open to that. We are open to that being a condition of approval tonight. And that will also help on the incompatibility question that has been raised by a number of people. So if we have half-acre lots bordering those acre lots, and they have animal rights attached to it, it's really no different than the zoning directly to the north, which is half-acre lots with animal rights. So it's already an existing condition. The roadway has been brought up, 5490. I think it's probably, I would think it would be helpful and instructive to point out, to my understanding, from the city's and staff standpoint, that road going in is completely independent of this project and whether this gets approved or not. It has been on the city's master plan. It has been the city's intention to make that a public right-of-way for, I think, going on 15 plus years. And so I think that will go in irrespective of what happens tonight. And the city will work towards acquiring and working with property owners to make that a reality.
What will happen is during the discussion period, the applicant will have an opportunity to come forward and address council as well. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address council on this issue, please come forward.
Mayor, City Council, I'm Brett Bergen. I live at 5331 West Laurel Hill Circle. I've been a resident of West Jordan for almost 20 years, and the reason I moved out here is for open spaces, for horse property. I had horses most of my life, so that's what I want. That's what I came here for. Anyway, as I expressed in my last meeting with this, it's frustrating that we've got to this point when we barely got to meet with Peterson last week to kind of even see a proposed project. I mean, this should have happened clear back in July when we started talking about this. Instead of wasting time again, this is my 5th notice now for meetings, which this, you know, the zoning and planning never approved this in August, so I'm still trying to figure out, the recommendation was they have to have access through 5490 as a second entry point. So why are we even at this point to try to rezone something when it's still a private lane at that point? Why are we trying to rezone something that doesn't have the access point? And I don't know how you can go down a private lane with fire trucks when it's still zoned private. I mean, I know you can grant access, but I think we're, like Milt said, we're getting the cart before the horse. If we do rezone it, I would like to see the whole thing half acre, RR 0.5, which with the meeting with Peterson said that we couldn't do that, but it's obviously something because to the north of that it's happened. But if we did half acres the whole way through, it would transition to the farm on the west, the RR1s on the east, and to the north are all half acres. It would transition that whole property. If Joan Cahoon wants to build to the 5 acres to the north of this proposed property, everything could be half acres all the way through with horse rights, and everybody would be happy. I just kind of have a hard time with putting quarter-acre lots in there when we have so much high density around here anyway. We don't need more high density. That's why we all moved here, is we want space. It's been mentioned by other people. We want the open space. That's why we're here. And I don't plan on leaving, but I don't want to be pushed around by having little lots around my big property. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelvin Green, I won't rehash the minutes because I'm sure you've read them. What I wanted to reiterate is what Mr. Langford said. Tonight is the decision on, in a lot of ways, it's one of those decisions about public policy, about RR zone versus regular residential zone, and what the long-term future of the city and residential is. It really is about the direction of the public policy. And so it's like what the old show Kung Fu. It's your choice, grasshopper. Make a good decision. I think that's where we need. So whatever you decide, please understand that it's going to affect not this property, but multiple decisions in the future. And I know I have heard council members talk about looking at the future land use map and the general plan and all those kind of things. It's one of those kind of public policy decisions that we need to look at for the future. So that's my comment, is just, and my traditional the city manager tells me I am not speaking on behalf of the public or the planning commission. That's just sole personal opinion. But again, choose wisely, because it does make a difference on what the future of this area and the future of West Jordan looks like.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Lynn Bowler. I live at 5490 West, 7095 South. I come to you tonight in various capacities, actually. My day job is as a developer, and so I'm somewhat sensitive to that side of things. I represent and am the HOA president for 5490 West and have the consent of 51 individuals. Yes, sir.
Apologies, just quick point of order. If he's speaking on behalf of the HOA, is that 5 minutes instead of 3? Are you speaking on behalf of the HOA? Okay, then you
Request
actually
that.
Then that would be appropriate to be given 5 minutes.
Apologies, thank you.
Nope, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. So as the HOA president, 51 individuals have emailed me, and we've held a couple different meetings, and I have some feelings to share from them as well. We thought rather than having 51 different people stand up that you might enjoy hearing from just one person tonight. I also love West Jordan City and enjoy serving in West Jordan City in various capacities. I'm also directly involved with the farm across the street to the west and want to apologize in advance if I brought any smells in with me tonight. And so I realize that can be a smelly affair sometimes. We love farming. We love this area. I was born and raised in West Jordan on 2200 West. I'm not native to the 5490 West area, but my wife and I chose that area almost 20 years ago, and we've really enjoyed it. Now tonight, as I've listened to different comments, I wrote down 7 items that seem to be something that's repeated, and so I would like to take just a minute and go through those quickly if I can. First and foremost is the zoning that we're talking about tonight. There are certainly some compatibility issues. Representing the HOA, we agree with what has been generally said about animal rights, about sizes of lots, the compatibility primarily with the farming operation. I think that that's the highest intense use in that area. Second would be the road access. It is a private road. The way that road is held or title is that each property owner owns to the center line of the road. And then there's a 33-foot wide easement granted to each member who is in the HOA. Now, once a plat's recorded, they are not part of the HOA. And so I think that's an important principle here, that in your subdivision requirements, 14.5.5A, if I do remember correctly, requires 2 points of access. A private road does not qualify as a second point of access, although it does help with emergency access, and we've been blessed by having emergency vehicles come through our private road from times past, and we hope that they'll continue to help us in the future. So that's one primary issue. The next one is the general plan for the area. I would think that it would make more sense to take a mile-long stretch of road, largely undeveloped, and look at it in a macro view first before we start looking at individual zonings, especially given the concerns about the private road and how it will develop. Without use of eminent domain, I don't anticipate that there would be a secondary access granted at this point. And that's the other half of the road is owned by the farm and by my family. Next, you have a 450-foot cul-de-sac length. I won't bore you with those details. You know those. So it would allow approximately 2 lots to be developed, 2 lots wide to be developed off the existing stub street. I was involved in the development originally in Shadow Mountain Estates, the 1-acre lots. We had a stub road coming into this property, and the owner, who's still the owner, made us take that out, contrary to city ordinance, because he said, I will never sell, I will never develop. And so I want to be careful that we, as a community, don't take that same approach. Never is a really long time, and someday we will develop. And so I would rather be smart about it as we move forward. And property rights are important to me. I know they're important to you. We respect those property rights. And so I don't want to stand up here and say, don't develop. My request tonight is to say, please develop in a smart and orderly fashion. Thank you for the extra time tonight.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have one question for Lynn, if I can.
Yes, sir.
How long have you been the HOA president on that street?
Yeah, so I was elected vice president in, I don't know, 10 years ago, and president about 3 months ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, much to my chagrin.
Do you know, trust me, I'm in an HOA, I feel your pain. Do you know who the previous HOA president was?
Yes, Kelly DeLue was
Okay.
the previous HOA president.
Okay, thank you. I was just listening to minutes from a previous meeting and the HOA president was referenced. I didn't know if that was you or somebody else. So
And there's some, I think, there's a public record and there's the elections and meetings that have gone on. I know the public record is actually Dave Barber, because as I got into this, and when I was elected, I thought I better update the public record, realized it hadn't been updated for 15-ish years, I believe. So just in case there's some conflict in information out there.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Council members, if I could just interject and let you know that feedback that we're getting on Facebook and elsewhere is they can hear Kayleen, they cannot hear anyone else. So if you will lean into your mics when you talk, perhaps they'll hear the questions that you're posing a little better. Thank you.
My name is Amy Martz. I live at 5438 West Bridal Vista Circle in West Jordan. I'd just like to remind the council once again, I've been here 3 or 4 times now with the same message, that residents rely on your zoning. We check the maps before buying property, and we expect that you will keep those zones similar and not give in to every developer that comes and wants to change the use of that property. We moved to these areas because there were larger lots. We expected that our neighbors who develop later would also include larger lots into their property designs. And we expect you to withstand the pressure from developers and maintain the lot size that we have experienced and planned for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Justin Hendricks. I live on 5426 West Tim Court, so it's in the Winter Circle development. I appreciate and respect the comments that my neighbors have made. I think I share a lot of their thoughts. I have a different perspective in some regards, which is, I think that the plan that Peterson has put forward is a continuation of what we did in Bella Estates as well as Winter Circle. And I think that those lot sizes and those homes fit in the West Jordan area. I don't think that bigger lots are always better. I think the 0.3 to the 0.5 makes a lot of sense and fits in with what we've done. I drove through this area today before I came, not just the area just east of the proposed development, but also north to the east where we have a lot of 1 acre lots. And the reality is you don't see a lot of farm animals. You see homes with multiple RVs, you see homes with multiple trailers, you see homes with multiple cars. And my fear is that if we put in bigger lots, we don't necessarily retain the ability to landscape and maintain those yards that we would like to see. So I agree with what people have said, which is we need to move forward and we need to be smart and consider the long-term implications of the decision. But I don't think necessarily the bigger is always better, and we can look in this community and see examples. You know, I drove by one neighbor that has 5 trailers in his backyard, and one neighbor that has 3 RVs, one that has 4 RVs. And so I think if we were using the bigger lots for things that it was maintainable, that was not an eyesore, I would be completely for that. But you just can't control what gets into that space. So just be mindful that bigger isn't always better, but I do appreciate and respect the comments that my neighbors have made and think we need to be wise and prudent in making this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address council on this issue?
Randy Bowler, 6663 South, 2200 West Jordan. You can tell by my address, I don't even live in this neighborhood, but I think you ought to hear from me anyway. And appreciate you being here, Mayor and council members. I am grateful for your time that you give to the benefit of the city. Just to reiterate two thoughts. One is that, and again, I develop and I farm. As we look at property to develop very early on, we have to see a pathway to develop that property. And so we have to look at public utilities, dry utilities, public access, all of those issues to make sure before we even initiate a rezone application, we can see kind of a pathway where we can get from point A to point B to where we have a completed development project. I don't see that here. And so I think we've kind of flipped ourselves backwards in trying to address a zoning issue on a piece of property that there's not a clear pathway. And so I think we ought to address a clear pathway, then come back to look at the land use and development there. So I'd suggest that this property not be rezoned for development until we have a pathway, a good access. Second point is, it's interesting, even though I don't live in this neighborhood, I own multiple businesses in the neighborhood, and they happen to be right on 5490 West. It was interesting to me as I looked at the revised rezoning request, the boundary to the subject property that has the highest intense use of agriculture and farm animals is to the west. And there was no buffer there for any larger lots. That's where they wanted to put the R112 lots. And so at this point, if it were to be developed or rezoned, it ought to be rezoned, I think, to an R.5 where you have adequate size lots to continue the animal rights. Because you've got currently 3 sides of the subject property that have animal rights, and only one side that does not. And so just addressing the comments of the gentleman that was here just before me, yeah, there may be some trailers on some of the lots, but there's a lot of animals out in this area. And I happen to be an owner of many of those. So we'll just ask you to proceed with this in the proper order. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Seaman. I'm with Peterson Development. A couple things. I was at the meeting that was hosted, the neighborhood meeting, and it seemed like there were 4 main concerns. One is change. No one wants change. 2 is the buffer zone with the properties to the east, the horse properties. As Ryan said, we're willing to make it a condition that these be horse property on those lots to the east. I think talking to people as they saw half-acre lots and horse property, that resolved a lot of their concern on that. The other issue that came up was the subdivisions to the south. They didn't want all of these lots coming through their neighborhood and going up in there, which ties into 5490 West. Anybody along 5490 West wants that to be maintained a private road. It is interesting. My background is in title. Looking at the amended and restated CC&Rs from 1997, there hasn't been anything recorded since. I want to declare something about what Mr. Bowler said is it does allow for subdivisions. The 5-acre lots could be subdivided, and those partial units would have a certain percentage rights in the HOA. So when a plat gets recorded, it doesn't absolve this land from the HOA. In fact, Bella Estates and Winter Circle are same principles, so it doesn't absolve them of that HOA. It's interesting because it does talk about 5490 and the city's rights. I'm not an attorney, but I know title, and it's going to be a pickle dealing with this issue going forward. How it's been handled so far in the subdivisions to the south is that half of the road gets dedicated to the city, as was pointed out by Mr. Langford. The residents along 5490 who pertain to this HOA, I don't think understand entirely what their HOA documents say, what the CCNRs say. And I'm not an attorney for the city, but I'd take a look at that as moving forward. But we were cognizant of the buffer. We wanted people to have that buffer, keep their animal rights. I was driving up and down 70th and between 22nd and 27th West, and you see a lot of horse property along there. I imagine you don't get too many calls from neighbors complaining about those horses. People generally know what they're getting when they buy. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address council tonight on this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and come back to council for further discussion and/or a motion. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a long list, but I'm going to start with a question for staff. And that is, we've heard from the applicant and from many residents. Residents would like animal rights on some of these lots, especially that eastern portion. And the applicant has said that that's something that they're willing to do. However, that's a different zone, if I'm not mistaken. That'd be an RR.5 as opposed to an RE 20 or whatever it is. We can't grant animal rights in an RE zone, can we? Or can we?
You can't. Per ordinance, if it was the council's decision to go that route, instead of approving an RE 20, you would approve an RR 20.
Right, RR 20 or .5 or whatever, yeah. Yeah, I think we call them 20 now, right? For 1,000 square feet, yeah. Okay, that's what I was kind of thinking. When the applicant was here before, last time when we heard this briefly and then pushed it off till now, I did ask if they'd be open to 0.5 acre or to RR rural residential with animal rights. I think that is probably the best fit. However, that's not what's being asked for tonight. Regardless of their being open to it, that's not what's on the table. You either get what you got, what's already there, or you get what you're asking for, which is on your application. We can't arbitrarily make up a zone. As much as we would like to, we can't zone this commercial tonight or anything else, or heavy industrial or anything else. We get what you applied for and or what's already there.
But it is within your discretion to do a rural residential from a RE, an ordinance the council allows to make that legislative decision.
Could we make it something else? Could we make it R16?
Sure. Because it's not consistent with the map, it'd have to go back to the planning commission.
I think that could be problematic. At least if I was the applicant, I'd be like, what the heck are you doing? You're just taking everything out from under me, considering it's not our property, it's not already that way. But, okay, I appreciate that update. In any case, I like the RR.5 better than I do like the RE 20 or the RR 20, however we want to say it. My other comment on that, or no, I do have another question for staff. Has there been any complaints from, this may be for Brock, as much as anybody. Has there been any complaints from the Bella Estates subdivision now? Because there's current animal rights vested on this property, right? The subject property that we're talking about has animal rights currently. There are currently animal rights to the east and to the north. Has Bella Estates, any of those neighbors complained about animal noises, smells, flies?
That would go to animal control, but to my knowledge, through code enforcement, no.
Okay. And my point with that question is there's always going to be a line somewhere, right? Anytime you have animal rights and non-animal rights properties, which there's a line currently, it's just 10 acres south of where it would be if we approve this. So there's already a line. If there's complaints on the one side of the line, I could see the justification for saying no, because there's going to be complaints on the new side of that line. But I would think that if there's no complaints now, I don't think that there would be complaints in the future just because we moved the line and kind of copied what's already there and shifted it north by a parcel here. One other animal rights, precedents, yeah. We talked about not setting a precedent. Somebody mentioned not setting a precedent. The precedent was actually set about 4 years ago. I was on the planning commission at the time when the other two developments here on 5490 kind of started this domino tipping. And with Winter Circle being the first one and then Bella Estates being the second one, this is the third domino in that chain. And I see the dominoes have already fallen, and this one, I would have thought, kind of would have fallen right in line with the other two. However, they have made some concessions on that. I'm still not sure which way I'm gonna fall on this. Having the option to do a rural residential on that eastern half helps. Also with, if the road is improved and dedicated and made a public road, I think that provides the buffer between the farm and the other lots across the street, because they're gonna be now across a collector road street, an 80-foot wide or whatever it is street. I think that does provide some buffering. Anyway, just a couple of my thoughts out there for anybody to do with what they like until I vote.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a lot of notes that I jotted down on a lot of ideas. I'll try and be as succinct as possible, but there are really 7 things that I want to hit on. This will come out sounding like a question, but I just want to lay out everything that's running through my mind so you know where I'm coming from, and I feel like the guy in the meme. Okay, here it is. Changed my mind. First up, kind of a question to staff. I'm not really looking for an answer, but this is what's running through my mind. 5490, and we're talking about access. It's a private road. Does the city have jurisdiction over that to dictate who can or must connect to it? And how does that impact the owners of the road? Even for emergency access, while I appreciate the idea that, okay, well, 5490, maybe if we were to chain it off so it's not the primary access, we can just have fire trucks and that down there. Well, what happens if those folks who own 5490 want to do something else with it? Are we putting them in a position of potential liability where they can't shut down their road for maintenance and repairs because that has to be maintained open for emergency access? I'm not looking for an answer, but that's one of the things I'm just wondering. Is this going to put an undue burden on the folks who own 5490, and are we shifting the responsibility there? That's really a big question that I'd like to see resolved. Along with that, actually, I'll just keep reading in order. My notes are a little disjointed, so I apologize. There has been a lot of change the last 5 years with this area, and I don't think the resident or the neighbors are at all afraid of the change, but they've been embracing it and preparing and actively involved in it. One of those changes that we saw is something I've only seen once on the city council, where there was a quote-unquote down zoning of a property right there because it is an active agricultural operation. And that zoning was changed to make sure that those who are around it knew what was happening and knew that that's the type of community this was. Doesn't really directly impact anything, but that's just kind of in the back of my mind that this is a different neighborhood than most. Going back to the zoning, the general plan states that our general plan states that our placeholder zone is agricultural. Can you jump to the slide that has the zones that are out there right now? I think other direction. There we go. So A1, that's a placeholder zone. This is RR1D. According to our general plan, that's not a placeholder. So if we're looking for a change, I'm looking for something similar to this, such as the RR20 or something like that. The other thought, it was brought up the meeting that was held with the neighbors just last week. I'm sitting here listening to hear, okay, well, what has changed since that meeting with the neighbors? It was commented that there was some good discussion, but I didn't hear anything about a change to the plan from what came from that meeting. I did hear that there was an openness from the applicant to consider animal property, but that's not the proposal here. I don't want to try and change up. If they brought one request, I don't want to say, well, you're going to get something different. I'd rather they bring that as a fresh request and say, here's what it is that we're asking for. But I do like the idea of the animal rights being incorporated in the property. The other thought that I had is we had a negative recommendation from the Planning Commission on multiple counts. I'm looking for something substantial to hit each of those 3 elements, and I'm just not hearing it. I very much appreciate, by the way, Scott, or Mr. Langford and Mr. Gardner, the weak positive. I very much like that because it does add some color and some context. It's not just a, yes, we agree, we support this fully. It's, to me, it feels more like, okay, we're on the right path, we're going the right direction, but there might be some things that need work. So I very much like the color and the context from that. But it does make me think about the long-term implications. When I think about, well, we're close, maybe not quite there. If we were to go along with supporting that, I'm thinking about my own neighborhood, where the subdivision just to the north of me, we've got streets that dead end into brick walls behind a shopping center. We have the same thing over by the old stock building supply off of 90th and 13th. We have a few of these places where it just wasn't well thought out. And if we can take a little more, make sure it's the right plan for the area. I can't remember who said it. But the last thing that kind of stuck with me, and I kind of feel bad for this, but not really, but when Mr. Bergen pointed out that he's received 5 notifications for different hearings that are out here, I feel bad with the residents repeatedly coming out here, but I'd rather drag you guys out here to make sure we get it right than just run with something and say, well, let's just be done. So as it stands right now, I think we're going down the right path. I think it's going the right, it's on generally the right heading, but I don't think it's there yet. Last time, I was supportive of just continuing. At this point, I'm very much leaning towards a denial. I'd like to hear a new, fresh plan brought that goes past the Planning Commission again and gives them an opportunity to give us a good recommendation, another set of eyes. I don't want to get negative recommendations across the board on multiple counts and then us think, well, we'll just run with it. It's probably fixed enough. I'd rather go back to them and make sure we get it right. The last thing that's been running through my mind for this whole conversation wasn't long ago where I was in someone was sharing the idea that good fences make good neighbors. We have to know what our boundaries are. We have to know where we can and can't play, what lines we can't cross, where we're talking about 5490 and the ownership of that private road and the city trying to mandate who connects to it. I'd like that to be cleaned up. I don't want us to start mandating anything there. When we look at the usage of property, I want to make sure that we have good connections between the folks who have very intentionally purchased land out here and those who are looking to develop. I want to make sure that we're making this, as much as possible, trying to set this up to be West Jordan, where it is the home of the good neighbor. We're helping set those fences in the right place and not doing it arbitrarily. And I just don't see, with what's been proposed, how we can support that and come up with the city that at least I'm envisioning. So that is a lot of what's running through my mind. I'd love to hear other thoughts, but now you know what I'm thinking, so I'll relinquish the floor. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, and I've got a couple questions, but I wanna get with Rob Wall, real quick and just get a clarification, kind of what Councilmember Jacob was speaking to. So we, for some legal advice, Rob, or Mr. Wall. So the applicant had suggested that he's open to having it be an RR zone, but that's not really the application that's ahead of us. And it seemed to me like Mr. Gardner was inferring that you know, we can say, yes, your application is an RE20, but based on your verbal commitment that we'll approve an RR20 zone, but that seems disingenuous to me.
Well, and the general rule is if you're going to change a zone that has been noticed a certain way and you change it to a less intensive use, you can go ahead and make that amendment. But if it's a more intense use, which I think agricultural use of the property would be, you would have to renotice the request.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. On our zoning distribution map that we have up here, just for comparison purposes, current acreage that's an RR20, which is not what this zone is, but is like the RR1E to the east. We have 774 acres, or 3.7% of the city, versus RE20, which is what is proposed, which is 68 acres, or 0.33% of the city. So RR20 is more common. The other question I have, and this is prior councils and its history, It's historical, but to the south, on the same side of the street, there's R112s. And that's different than the R110s. That's more dense than the R110s to the east, the RR1Es to the east, the RR.5 to the northeast. So I don't know, Scott, is there kind of just a little synopsis of how we got those R112s? Quarter acres, and what year that was maybe, or?
When was that? Last year? No, 2 years. Yeah, 2 years ago.
Bell and Winter Circle Estates originally started, I believe, with an R1 or R110. And the staff said we wouldn't accept anything smaller than R112. It needed to be a larger lot at that time. And so that's how it came about. And the applicant applied for that, and that's what the planning commission sent forward and the city council eventually approved, so.
And what you don't see on the, that's kind of cropped on the bottom of the screen, you have R112 directly to the south of those two subdivisions that you referred to.
Yeah, so there's 3 parcels that are all. Is that RE30? Okay. Let me get back to my questions. Okay, and then back in 2017, I think it was Mr. Barber that had, I think he was the HOA president, he invited me and we chatted and drove the road. And he had made a comment that on 5490 West, that, let me just get to my screen here, the email. On 5490 West, that it being a private road and the HOA, but he said there wasn't a lot of, and I don't know who could answer this, but there weren't, not everybody was paying, so I don't, into the HOA. So I don't know if the HOA currently collects fees to maintain 5490. He kind of inferred that there was a desire to make it public, which is kind of in our plan. So I kind of heard tonight 2 different, I've heard 2 sides to 5490 West. I've heard a side where residents do want it to be public, and tonight I heard that they want it to remain private. So I gotta work through that one. And then the other one is more just, you know, kind of like what Councilmember McConaughey is, just things going through my mind. It's difficult to sit up here and balance property rights of all. You've got somebody that wants to either sell a property or develop a property that impacts somebody else who owns property who doesn't want to sell their property, that they have it for their quiet enjoyment, highest and best use to them, just like where I live in my house. It's exactly what I want. It's the highest and best use for what I have right now. And so just, you know, I'm running through all of these things, just trying to figure out how best to balance property rights of all. But I am, you know, I don't want to say a struggle. We already have R112 on 5490, or backing 5490. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members, for your comments. I appreciate those. And this is a good example of what we do. We get this information, we study it, we look over it, and sometimes people think that we make our decision before we get here because we had information ahead of time. But on situations like this, we don't. We wait and we talk about it and we mull around some more, and I still can't tell you how I'm going to vote yet. And I enjoy the emails that I've received and the calls I've had on this and the conversations we've had to help me have more information. Sometimes that makes it easier to make a decision. Sometimes it makes it more difficult because things conflict. And as Councilmember Anderson was talking about 5490, I do remember years ago that the HOA, I believe it was, and the residents out there wanted it to be, was asking the city to take that street over because there wasn't monies to take care of it, and they wanted it to be. And as I hear this today, and I hear the comments, I can't help but think, are they using 5490 to keep it private, not because they don't want the city to have control, but because they don't want the development to go forward, and they're just using that as another tool to help keep control over the development. And That's the thought going through my mind. The other one is, I think relationships are very important. I think the relationship that with the existing residents, with the new ones that may come in, with the changes that happens is very important. And I appreciate Peterson taking the time to put out a neighborhood meeting to meet with the neighbors and to work and talk with them and to adjust their plans, even though it may have just been slight, but to make some adjustments. I think that's good. I would like to see more of that happening. Maybe the residents that are existing could negotiate and work with Peterson, and Peterson could continue to work with them. But I think having the developers and the existing residents work together is real good. I'd say the future residents, but we don't know who those will be yet. And then the comment about what is there now is a dying culture. So then my thought is, why is it a dying culture? Is that because there's less people that want that? Or is it because our traditions have changed and we're not using the property for that way as much as it used to be? I mean, you look at what West Jordan looked like just 20 years ago and where it is today. Is that better or is it worse? If it's worse, is it because the people who were using the property otherwise sold it knowing that they weren't going to use it that way anymore and want somebody else to use it in a new way? So I think those are some good thoughts to be in there. I still haven't made my decision, but I appreciate the conversation that the councils have, and I appreciate each of you who have shared your thoughts with us today.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. In the late 80s, I lived in the Benyon-Taylorsville area, and my scoutmaster said, we're gonna go on a bike ride. So we rode our bikes down 27th, and then we turned west on 78th. And we rode past the airport, and there was nothing past the airport for miles. Rode our bikes all the way to Bacchus Highway. I'm sure some of these properties were there. Most of it was farming. It's just amazing when you look at the map now, and I don't consider myself old, but in a short time, all of this land has been gobbled up by homes and homes and homes. And I know Councilmember Jacobs talked about dominoes falling, and dominoes for this road started falling on 78th a few years ago when Bighorn Circle and Bride Creek Drive and all those homes were put in, and now the R12s are there as well. That kind of makes the dominoes even more. And so now here we are on the third round of dominoes, and I guess you have to ask yourself, if you live out there, when will the dominoes stop? I don't know if I can stop them. I don't know if you can stop them for those that live out there. But what we can do as citizens, what you've done tonight, and what I did as well as a citizen in my area over at 13th West, is I had the opportunity to go out and speak. And I spoke to the city council, and I made my thoughts felt about development in my area. For me, I live off 13th West, and for those of you who don't live out that area, you might think, there's no space there left. There isn't. Most of it's gone now. But our highest concern for some development over there was traffic. Just more traffic from apartments being built. Luckily, the developer tonight's not doing apartments, so that's great. Homes are a lot easier to talk about than apartments. But I kind of feel like tonight, think back to your childhood when you had that box that had all the different holes in it. There was one with the circle, with the square, with the triangle, and you tried to fit the pegs into the wrong hole. Well, if you didn't put the circle in the circle, it didn't go through. If you tried to put the square through the circle, it didn't go through. So I kind of feel like this tonight, like this is like that game right now where we're trying to fit something into an area that probably isn't the best fit. It fits for the developers, but it doesn't fit for the rural residents that live there. And I think all of us tonight are struggling with what should we do? What makes sense for all of us? I guess it was probably like 2 years ago, there was a development that came in that was next to the Ivory development. Now, the Ivory development was an R110, and the development just to the north is now going to be an R18 development. And residents in the Ivory homes came and complained about R18s going next to their R110s. At the time, I thought, well, it's not a big number. An R110 and R18 is not very big, but they were concerned. This is different. I think this number is a lot bigger, or going from the rural residents to what they put here. And I agree with a lot of what Councilmember Burton has said, and also what Councilmember Connie said, that this was something that we don't want to make a quick decision on tonight and make sure that it works for both sides. It works for the residents and it works for the developer as well. Because eventually it is going to be developed. And I think all of you that are here tonight know it's going to be developed. But at the same time, you've made your voices heard. And I want you to know that we've all heard it tonight. and it'll be the decision that we'll make so that we can make both parties, hopefully get what they want in the end. So, thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey. Okay, well, Councilmember
Thank you, Mayor. I
McConaughey,
was
let's
gonna say,
take
I'll stall
Councilmember
for
Whitelock.
Councilmember Whitelock and then.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you. I agree. This is a hard one. And part of my angst is that it didn't come in with animal rights. I really need to see it have animal rights for those that located there have their animals. When we've dealt with this in other locations, I went and walked, knocked on every door on the road, see how people felt, and find out when they moved in. And I found that there are people that want with animal rights and that love to have a half acre if that's all they can get. So I need to see that we have areas for people that want to have animals. And I understand that sometimes we use large lots for other things. But if we take away all the opportunity, we take away part of our history, I feel. So for me, I really need to come in as rural residential. So I'm struggling that it's not. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me jump back to my notes real quick. Response to Councilmember Anderson's comments about 5490. Going back, it was at least 6 years ago on the council when we talked about the council policy for adopting private roads and turning them public. This was back with Mayor Johnson. So before Mayor Riding, before Mayor Rolfe, back with Mayor Johnson, there was a neighborhood to the north of Jordan Landing, and all of the hoops and all of the requirements to get that taken care of. The street had to meet the width requirements for public streets. It had to meet the condition grades as well to be adopted by the city. I want to be really careful in what we're doing, that there's no assumption that the city's just going to jump in and adopt the street and take care of improvements. So I know we've heard from some folks in the past saying, I wish the city would take care of that so we don't have to pay for that. Well, pretty much every HOA says that. So I believe that we actually have an ordinance that requires it be brought up to our standard road condition before it can be considered for adoption as a public street. So that still has to happen. And I believe when we spoke 6 years ago, we had staff tell us which roads would be potential candidates for adoption, and this is one that was brought up, and they brought up some deficiencies that would have to be addressed. So just wanted to throw that out there. I don't see anyone else who's lit up to make a comment, but Mayor, I know you haven't spoken, but I'm ready to make a motion if no one else has anything.
Go ahead.
I move to deny ordinance, where did it go? 19-45, based on the same criteria laid out by the Planning Commission.
Motion fails for lack of a second. Do we have another motion? Councilmember Jacob.
I'm not sure if I want to make a motion, but I do want to make a comment. I'm not quite ready to deny, but I'm not quite ready to approve. I'm kind of wondering if we can't, and I don't want to say table because I'd like it to change. I'd like it to be tweaked. I think we're close. I don't think that the proposal is so incompatible that it can't get there. I think compatibility is within reach and you can kind of see it from where we're sitting, but I don't think it's quite on the table yet. So I don't know if we deny this, if, tweaking the RE20 to an RR20 is a significant enough change to bring it back soon enough to to make that change and then vote in favor. I think that would assuage a lot of the concerns that were brought up. No application is going to make everybody happy. That's just a fact of life, right? Somebody's not going to like something that we do, no matter what is done here. So with that said, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't really just want to outright deny, but I'd kind of like to see it tweaked. I wonder if we can. Here's a question for Rob for legal. You mentioned a second ago that an R zone would probably be considered more intense than an RE zone, and therefore we wouldn't be able to just approve an RR zone. Would an RR zone, however, be considered less intense than an R112?
Yeah, I think if I said it that way, that's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say is if the zone you're considering changing it to is more intense than what was published, we need to renotice it and have you hear it again. If the RR20 zone and the RE20 zone are the same intensity, there's no problem. And I would ask Mr. Langford, who's the director, who has better familiarity with the text language of the zone, whether or not that would be considered a similar intense zone or not.
So we're looking for the definition of intensity then, I guess.
Well,
This
it
is an
depends
intense
on in the
question,
text
Scott.
what's allowed. If there are more uses allowed in one or the other, that's considered a more intense zone.
Scott?
What do you think?
So let me give you a code reference, 13-7D-8. That's in our current zoning ordinance. It does allow for the city council to approve a less intense zone. And I've been trying to communicate with Larry to get that definition. I'm not aware of that specific definition spelled out exactly in our code, but Mr. Gardner can weigh in.
I was always taught the intensity is the intensity of the regulation. So a half-acre lot, a R110 lot is more intense because it's regulated more heavily by the city than a half-acre lot. The animals are beside the point. That's a right. So, you know, someone could get a rural residential zone and, you know, put 100 chickens on there and 50 horses, and we'd say that's more intense. That's a ludicrous example, but it's really a right. It's not, it doesn't affect the intensity, because the lot says the same, the housing, what we're talking about is housing for humans here. And so the housing for the human in a rural residential is exactly the same as in the rural estate zone. However, the rural residential zone has an additional right to keep those large animals.
Okay, so one less regulation maybe might be considered less intense, okay.
But that's what I was taught, but I'm not an attorney, and I'm always open to learn new things, so.
But do you play one on TV, or did you stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so my thought here, and what I thought was gonna be really the sticking point for me based on a lot of the emails and comments that I've received and the comments made tonight, I thought the real sticking point for me was gonna be the road, was gonna be 5490, but where that does play into it, that's not the sticking point, it seems. It seems for me, the bigger sticking point is the compatibility. The transition from one zone to another zone to another zone. This is kind of a little bit in a patchwork quilt type zoning area, where you have a different zone to the north and a different zone to the east and a different zone to the south and a different zone to the west. And you're not gonna be compatible with all of them, no matter what is done here. You're gonna miss somewhere, because you can't, unless, I mean, it's like that jigsaw puzzle piece that doesn't fit, right? It's purple on the left and green on the right, and there's not a piece that matches. So nothing's gonna match perfectly here. So I'm thinking, what's the best compromise here? The fact that 5490 has been on the master transportation plan for a long time wasn't really, okay, it was brought up with Bella Estates and with Winter Circle to the south, because one of those at least was originally designed to stub out to 5490, and there was some talk there. So that does play into this a little bit. But for me, the compatibility is a bigger issue, and I think there's a compromise available to us, and I think it's that our zone on the east half, and I think that's probably the way I'm leaning, is toward approving that with that compromise. Again, there's not gonna be anything that's gonna make everybody happy on this one. So we either try to find the best compromise or annoy the least amount of people, and that's a tough one to balance. So I'll leave that there, because there's several other comments before anybody moves.
Well, before we do actually make another motion, we had promised the applicant they had an opportunity to address us. And I know that he'd like to finish up his statement, so we'll move on. Before we do make the motion, though, we will allow that to happen. So let's go ahead with Councilmember Conahay. Or would you all rather have the applicant address us now?
The applicant, I don't know, I guess this is a question for legal. I would have thought that the applicant should have addressed what we did hear from the applicant during the comment period with everybody else. Now that we've already had debate and deliberation, to give the applicant an opportunity to weigh in, having heard where we're coming from and where we're going, does that give an unfair advantage to the applicant over the rest of the public who are here?
If you think it does, then you could hear from the applicant and the public. It's up to you. It's not uncommon in a lot of cities, in fact, most cities, that any questions that come up or ideas that are different, the council allows the applicant to address them. If you want to do that, you can. Whether or not you think that's unfair is up to you.
Well, I'd like to give the applicant just a couple of minutes to finish his statement, because I promised him he could.
Is that 2 minutes, 3, 5?
2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. Yes, I would just add a few parting thoughts. The existing land use for this property is very low density residential, which if you look at the staff report, that means up to 2 units to the acre. This is 10 acres. We are conceptually, it's only a concept, we are showing 18 lots on here on 10 acres. That is 1.8 units to the acre. That is less than very low density residential. I think that's worth keeping in mind. This is not dense, especially where you see the trends of communities going along the Wasatch Front with the pressures we're experiencing with population and such. Secondly, someone already pointed out that the road on the west side of this is a buffer to the animal uses. I don't have too much to add. My final thought is this is not the end of the process. I know we see a concept up there showing X number of lots. This is just rezone. We will continue to work with neighbors and hear concerns and take input, but we know there's a big step left, a big step remaining were this to be approved to rezone tonight before any lots would ever appear. So I thank you for your time. I'm free to take any questions if there are any. If not, I can sit back down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Conahay.
Thank you, Mayor. So I agree with most of what Councilmember Jacobs shared earlier. I think there is a good compromise. My biggest issue is the process and the hoops that the neighbors have been jumping through. I don't want to make the change from what the applicants proposed and say, sure, we'll approve this, but with this modification. None of the residents that came here tonight were prepared to speak to that option. They may have spoken in favor of it, but they were prepared with the information that was in the packet and not with the audible that was called, and I don't think it would be appropriate for us to assume that they would be primarily in favor of that. I know I didn't do my homework with that thought in mind, so there are some things I'd like to consider as well. While I'm also in the past I've also suggested, well, let's table this and have further conversation at another time once there's been a little more information made available. This could have happened a number of times. There was a public hearing that was scheduled that the developer didn't show up at. All the not all, but a lot of the folks that are here, they did. They came out of their way and they shared their thoughts. A lot of that could have been taken into consideration with this, and we could have had something tonight ready to go, but I don't want to continue to drag the neighborhood through things. I would like to see a firm up or down so that things can move forward, and I believe it should be down because while it's close, we've already had this stretch out for so long, and I would like to see the proposed modifications go back to the Planning Commission. Let the residents see fully documented what's going to be proposed with the, if there's RR zoning in there. So I don't think it's appropriate to continue or to try and do something on the fly. There have been opportunities in the past where it may have been better, but at this point, so many times through it, I would be in favor of denial and opposed to most anything else. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you, and I have a great deal of respect for Councilmember McConaughey. And the residents have noted that they've been out a number of times, and the developer did not come to the one public hearing, even though the residents did. And I do agree with Councilmember Jacob that I think finding a middle ground compromise is probably a good choice. So seeing that there's no other comments, and recognizing that it is kind of an audible, but I think it's audible from the standpoint of the residents who are speaking tonight in support of having animal rights, and the developer who made an audible on being okay verbally with an RR20, and taking the legal advice of our attorney that there is a similar intensity between an RR20 and an RE20, same size lots, and the RR20 allowing horse rights, which don't change the intensity, and due to the fact that the southern properties are already zoned R112, I'm going to move to approve ordinance 1945, amending the general land use plan land use map amendment for 10.02 acres from very low density residential to low density residential, and rezone from RR1D zone to R112 zone, 12,000 square foot lot minimum, and RR20 residential, rural residential, 20,000 square foot minimum lots. That's my motion. Thank you.
Councilmember Jacob?
I will second and then ask for some clarification. So second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Jacob. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Burton.
My question for you, Councilmember Anderson, since if we made it RR20 the whole way across, that would be really close to what they're asking for and would meet similar requirements, would be able to do. Would you consider adjusting your motion to do that?
No, because the applicant didn't present that. I'm keeping it exactly as it was presented, other than the verbal declaration that's it's the same intensity. So it would be the east half would be the RR20 and the west half would be the R112. And to me, it's contiguous because the southern properties are already R112.
Councilmember Jacob?
I was just going to ask if Councilmember Burton wanted to jump back in. Okay. Similar thought to what Councilmember Anderson just said, as far as what is being asked for versus that thought occurred to me too. And when you say that is much of what most of the people are asking for, it's true, but not the one person whose property rights are actually vested in this application, and that is the applicant. So it's tough because it's a property rights issue, right? You have the property rights of the owner, you have the property rights of everybody who lives next to the owner and says, I don't want a drag strip built in my backyard because those drag racing cars are noisy, and so I don't want that. And that's going to reduce my property values. Fortunately, this isn't that. This isn't that intense. It's not that big of a change. My question for Councilmember Anderson for clarification on the, and you can just nod or not so we don't have to mess with microphones, but is it your intent that everywhere in the resolution as it was written, it replaces the RE20 with RR20? It's in the resolution, or the ordinance a couple of times. Yes. Okay, I figured that would probably be the net effect of your motion. So that said, I'm in favor as it sits.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So we deviated a little bit from standard decorum when we had the developer come up and speak again. I wonder if Mayor's Chair, you'd be willing to deviate again just a little bit. I'm curious to hear from the residents if we could do just a quick show of hands. I'd be curious to see how many would be in favor of the proposal with the change, or how many would still be opposed with the change.
Several had already mentioned that they would like to see the rural residentials remain. I think we heard from them.
Well, that sounded like it could have been directed to the entire.
And typically, we allow the applicant an opportunity during the discussion time to come up and speak, and we did not do that. So I inserted that in at that point.
Going back to the comments about the residents saying that they were in favor of the rural residential, I got the impression that from some of them, that was for the entire parcel or the entire property, where some may have just been the east. That wasn't clear. Again, going back to my other comment earlier, if we're calling an audible on something that's split zoning in here, that's not anything that anybody was really prepared to discuss. So that's why I'm still opposition. And I would like to see, but if the chair is not, or the council is not supportive of that, I would still be opposition to the motion. Thank you.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Well, I would be in support of Chris's ask of knowing how those that came out feel about rural residential, how they feel about what has been proposed, if they're okay with it. It would be good information.
We have a translator.
I think she said she would like to see a raise of hands too, just like Councilmember McConaughey said.
Thanks, Zach.
Mayor, if I may, instead of a raise of hands, I think if we had one or two people just speak in their behalf, I think that would be more informative than a raise of hands.
I will go with a raise of hands. Those that are interested in having this motion move ahead with the rural residential changing to the RR20 lots, please raise your hand.
Can you clarify the whole thing or just the east side?
It's just the 20, the RE20 to RR20. There are none in favor of that. I'm sorry?
It's not on the thing though, that's the problem, it's not on the agenda.
No, but if you were listening, we have the opportunity as a council to be able to make that change. Yes, we are not taking public comments. I just asked for a raise of hands. Okay. All right, I see no more comments from council members, so we'll vote.
Can I just confirm that the motion is as written, except that RE20 is being replaced with RR20?
That is correct.
Okay. Councilmember Burton.
No.
Councilmember Whitelock. Councilmember
No.
No? Okay. Councilmember McConaughey?
No.
Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
No.
Motion fails 4-3.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Since no one else has hit their button, I do think we're close. I do think we're moving the right direction. Obviously, when I threw out the motion earlier to deny, that did not go through. I'm not going to throw out the same motion again. I would encourage somebody else to throw out that motion, though. If we were to, the only other thing I can think of would be to table this to a later date. But really, I would like a full, complete proposal brought that's vetted by staff, vetted by the Planning Commission, has a clean recommendation that's brought to the City Council, a clean proposal presented to the residents that are out in the neighborhood, and a clear path for how the area will be developed. I can't see a better way forward than that. So I would encourage someone to make something along those lines. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Councilmember McConaughey, your thoughts on this are, we can deny this tonight and then have them go back and come with a new proposal? Go the process again. Okay.
like to make a motion then? Councilmember Lamb,
I'll go ahead with the motion then. I'll make a motion to deny.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Assuming it's referencing ordinance 19-45, I will be a second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lamb, a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
You were the second? Okay. Councilmember Whitelock?
Can you tell me what I'm voting on?
A motion to deny ordinance 10-45 in its entirety? Sorry, 1945. I went back in time there for a moment.
And the caveat there is that we're asking staff and the developer to bring something back with the rural residential, correct?
That's my understanding as well, that they would bring
Okay,
something.
then yes.
So I'm sorry, what was your, that was a yes? Oh, we have a.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, clarification, we have.
I'm sorry to jump in here, but I think the council should be aware of this. The zoning ordinance 13-7D-9 says, in cases where the zoning has been denied, no application for an amendment for the same or substantially the same request. And in the case of a map amendment on the same or substantially the same property shall be filed within 1 year of the date of the denial of the amendment. So if they're close, they won't be able to come back with a substantially the same zoning request for at least a year. Just wanted to let you know that.
Then I withdraw my yes.
Okay, so you're still up for a vote?
So knowing that, I will withdraw my motion, because I don't want them to wait for a year.
Okay. So the motion has been withdrawn. So anyone else like to make a motion?
So, Mayor?
Councilmember Conahey.
Thank you, Mayor. While it's substantially similar, that means they can't come back with something that says, we want the same thing. If they were to change it, the switch from RE to RR, I think we've made it very clear as a council that that's something we see as rather different and something that we're open to. So, Mr. Langford, in your professional opinion, if they were to come back with something that was RR, would that be something that could be heard within less than the 1 year time frame?
In my opinion, I think that is substantially the same. Historically, we treated that way. And that's only talking about a third of the property. If they were to come back, you would basically not allow them to go to request an R112 zone on 2/3 of that property. But historically, the way we've treated it, as Mr. Gardner's indicated, we look at substantially the same as lot sizes and density. And for all intents and purposes, the only difference between an RE zone and an RR zone is animal rights. And that's not, if the council wants to go on record and say that's a substantial difference between the two zones, we'll take that into consideration.
So if there were, so in that case, if there were a motion made to deny this, but allow the applicant to return in less than a year with an application that includes an RE element, or RR, thank you, an RR element, because that's as part of the motion, it would be compliant with our zoning ordinance and they could bring that back.
Look to Mr. Wall, does that violate our existing ordinance?
I'd be willing to defend that that's enough of a change that you could reconsider it. There's another way to do it. If the only concern is to give the public an opportunity to talk with the developer and staff about the RR zone, table it. Table the item, ask the staff to work with the developer to come back at a later date.
If I may, too, just thinking back on similar requests over the years, the council could direct staff to not just table it, but also take it back through the planning commission process to get their input, if that's a concern with you.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Mayor. I jumped down to give you an opportunity to speak, but I want to make sure that there's an I want to get a good, clean opinion from the Planning Commission. I want them to make sure the neighbors know exactly what they're voting on. I don't want to keep dragging the neighbors back for change after change after change. When we have public hearings where we don't re-notice and we're just referencing old information, I really don't like that. So the two additional motions I would be in favor of would be either a motion to deny with a motion to deny, but with an encouragement to the developer to, or an allowance for the property owner, the applicant, to bring back a new proposal that has an RE element outside of that 1 year, RR element outside of that 1 year period. And I guess my arm could be twisted to table it to a certain time, but we've been encouraging conversation between the developer and the property owner for some time, and it happened a week before, and I have a hard time with the thought that, okay, that meeting was just a week before, how much of an impact is that really gonna have on the final design when we've already got the public hearing noticed and out? And I'm not sure we're gonna end up anywhere different, but my arm could potentially be twisted to support tabling it, though not. It would be a weak positive for that. Thank you.
Okay, our attorney, Mr.
Just
Wall.
two more comments that may be helpful. You could table it to a time certain, and that would give the public notice, and it would also encourage the staff and the developer, you've got X number of days and get it done. The second thing is, Mr. Gardner noted to me that if, under the code, under the zoning code, that if this is considered a new application, which I think we could defend, that would require a new fee, new application, and developer, it imposes a burden on him to start over essentially, financially. So for those reasons, you may want to consider that impact on the developer in deciding whether or not tabling is the best approach.
So your suggestion is tabling might be the least expensive for the applicant?
Yes, and it is not uncommon, and it's certainly appropriate when you have an application before you to refer it back to the Planning Commission for another review. I mean, legally, that's certainly appropriate and allowed.
Well, I know there's a couple more on here to talk, but I would like to make a motion then.
Go ahead, I can do it as a discussion.
And that is to table this till the second meeting in February, which would allow the applicant time to go to the council or to the Planning Commission in January with a new application, if you will, new, whatever. Councilmember McConaughey?
Second, but I'm gonna ask for a friendly amendment. So we've got new folks who are gonna be coming onto the city council, new folks who are gonna be going onto the Planning Commission. I think having it that quick might be a little bit difficult. I would suggest the Planning Commission have it remanded to the Planning Commission's second meeting in February and to the city council when appropriate thereafter. Would you be okay amending the motion that way?
I will be okay amending the motion.
Okay, I'll stick with my second.
So a motion by Mayor Riding and a second by Councilmember McConaughey.
Although there's an interesting look from Mr. Langford.
And Mr. Wall.
Go ahead, you go first. I was just going to say, let's not call it a new application, just to review, another review based upon the discussions you've had tonight.
Okay.
Don't want anybody to say this is a new application so the developer starts over again.
Then an additional review. Thank you. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I would maybe think about definitions. We've gone from the definition of intensity to the definition of substantially, and I'm substantially intensified that this is an interesting conversation. I would just give our planning commissioners and the new planning commissioners and the new council members, some of whom are planning commissioners, just a little more credit and think that they might be able to handle this quickly. I don't think giving them extra time is necessary. I would say I'd be in favor if the motion said no later than, so that they could do it sooner if they were quicker, as opposed to giving them a specific date that they have to hear it on. Just because they're smart guys and gals.
Is that another friendly amendment?
If you would like to amend your motion, I would not be opposed to it. How's about that?
Well, I would include that in my motion as a friendly amendment. And is that, so I lost the second.
I'll second it.
Okay, so now we have another second by Councilmember Anderson. So Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you. The reason for withdrawing my second is, again, because the residents have been drug out. If we say, if we tell them which meeting it's going to be at, great. If we say it could be sooner, then they're going to be worried, did I get the notice, did I not get the notice? They're going to be out there again. So I would rather we set a specific date and say, this is when it's going to be with the Planning Commission, or we say, you know what, start from scratch. I would rather not put too much leniency on there.
See no more comments? Let's vote.
So are we at tabling to the planning commission to the second meeting in February? And no later than, okay. And then to the council when appropriate.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Nay.
Council Mayor Writing.
Yes.
And Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1.
Mayor?
Thank you, everyone. Councilmember McConaughey.
I move we recess until 8 p.m. Mountain
Mountain
time, for those who may be in other time zones.
That's the 9-minute, so we'll take a 9-minute recess.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes, it was.
1 minute. We need our council members back up here. We are not going to do a closed session tonight. No closed session. They don't need one tonight. Well, you got to have at least a quorum.
But there's one more we can formally start now that we're already 2.5 minutes late.
Thank you,
Actually, Councilmember
Councilmember
Whitewash there, we've got 4.
I've got 4, so we're starting. Public hearing, item 4B. Receive public input and consider for approval resolution 19-201, approving budget amendments clarifying the annual compensation of the mayor after January 6, 2020. Denise Steck.
Too short, sorry. This is an unusual budget amendment in that it's text only, so no numbers really. The budget document, when it was prepared, assumed the change in the salary as of January 1st of 2020. And as Mr. Wall has reviewed that, he recommended that we do a budget amendment and change that to be effective January 6th of 2020. In addition, in the notes to the change in the form of government, we added the word estimated because those were estimated costs. And we put language in that section that stated that you would take action on a separate item that would set the mayor's compensation, and these were estimates only. So again, there are no changes to the budget, the actual budget. They are text-only changes and amendments having to do with the timing of the change of the form of government.
Thank you. So questions from council. Start with Councilmember Burton.
I don't have a question, just have a comment on this and the next public hearing. I think because I have been elected mayor and this pertains directly to me, I believe there's a conflict of interest in my part, so I am going to step down. Are we not on those 2 public hearings? So I'm going to step down during those public hearings that talk about the mayor's salary.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just question if this first one really is a conflict of interest because it's not actually changing the mayor's salary, it's changing the date.
It's a date, it's not a conflict
And
of
it's
interest
also
on that.
changing the text at the bottom saying it's an estimate, and it's not actually doing anything with the salary, so. The next one, yes, but this one I would think no.
If it has nothing to do with the money, I will stick around then. If it has to do with the money, I'll step down.
Seeing no more questions from council member, I will open this up for public comment.
Mayor?
Anyone from the public that would like to address council on this issue, please come to the microphone. Rob Wall.
Before you do that, let me just, I'm the one that counseled Councilmember Burton to step down in both of these. And if you're all fine with him staying there, I'm fine with it too. The reason I suggested on this first one, if you remember, the last council meeting, or maybe it was 2 council meetings ago, there was some question as to whether or not that figure in the budget was actually the council's determination that that was the salary. This clarifies that it was not. So it could be argued that it is a numbers change. Having said that, if you're all comfortable that all we're doing now is clarifying the budget, it's my opinion that it's not a conflict if you all agree, and it's fine for Councilmember Burton to stay on the dais.
Okay, thank you. So we will move ahead with the public hearing from the public. Anyone wishing to address council on this issue, please come to the microphone. Seeing none, I will close public hearing and come back to council for further discussion and/or a motion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. With this particular one being just those minor changes that clarify what the council has said previously, I move to adopt Resolution 19-201.
Councilmember Anderson.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey, a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock,
She nodded yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Can you repeat the motion for me?
Sure.
Resolution 19-201.
Yes.
Yes.
I apologize. Trying to do my job in 2 different ways at the same time. Oh. Oh, yes.
Okay. Councilmember Burton. Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
We will excuse Councilmember Burton and discuss item 4C. Receive public input and consider for approval ordinance 19-46, amending Title I Administration of the 2009 West Jordan City Code regarding the compensation of the mayor and other elected officials. Rob Wall.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, this is part of what Ms. Steck referred to in the prior changes to the budget, where on the one page, the one budget document you amended referred to an action you would take subsequently to determine the actual salary. This is what this action would now do. The language that is before you is attempting to address the concerns that came up during the last discussion about the salary